What's up, Rangers fans? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are having a great start to your day. I know I am, because we're in for a jam-packed new episode of Rangers Review. Myself alongside Statboy Steven. You guys know the drill by now. We'll be doing a deep dive on the past week of games for the New York Rangers, and I will just like to say this right now. I was completely right about my prediction going into this week, so that was the first time I actually nailed it, so I want to pat myself on the back. But regardless, we'll be doing a deep dive again on these games, how they have fared, the guys that have been hot, including KREIDER over the past couple weeks, and also taking a look at the guys that are returning back in the lineup that are now fully healthy and what is expected for the Rangers in the upcoming week of games and going forward. So as always, guys, make sure you stay all the way until the end of the video, find all the deets and all our thoughts on the Rangers, how they're performing, and what's next for them. If you guys end up enjoying this kind of Ranger content and want to see more great Ranger content like this, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, share this video with your friends, put on the notification bell, all those great things. Thank you all so much for the countless support, guys. Now let's get right into today's episode. All right, guys, welcome back here for another episode of Rangers Review. Big week for the Rangers this week. I just wanted to start out by saying that I was right. When we look back on our predictions from a week ago, we said, what are they going to be for the upcoming week? I said 3-1 and actually nailed it. So I'll take that pat on the back, as short-lived as it may be. But before we go into anything yet, Steven, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Honestly, how many Ranger fans expected us to go 3-1 without Panarin against in a division that's considered the strongest division this season? I mean, scoring 6 goals twice against the Devils is great, and then just winning 3 out of 4 or 3 in a row when you're without Panarin, without Trouba, Hedl coming back but still not taking faceoffs, Shesterkin out with injury. It's nice to see the Rangers win a couple of games, but I don't think a lot of fans would have expected this realistically.
No, yeah. I mean, I went 3-1 being very optimistic. I made that clear, but I think that when it came to those games, the Devils game stood out to me as, yes, they've been a thorn in our side for a while, but something told me that they were kind of starting to get a groove with this team. Even with Panarin out, just a lot of guys starting to contribute more, and that's why I have the header for today's episode, especially talking about KREIDER and how on fire he's been. So we'll deep dive his play along with plenty of others' plays, but just in a nutshell for everyone that's just chiming in, when we look at the games individually, starting off with game 20 for the Rangers against the Sabres, all with the Eichel talk going in hand. Eichel was pretty much non-existent that game. As we know, the Rangers win 3-2. Lafreniere scores another goal, and at that point, he was definitely starting to get on a hot streak. That streak has since ended, but it's still nice to see that he's definitely picking up the play and looking like that first overall pick that some people were worried about, with him being pretty much pointless for a bit to start out the season. So that was great to see his performance there with a beautiful goal. And then you also have Buchnevich with a goal and assist. He has been stellar, and I must say, we talked about in a previous episode how you asked me if Panarin would still be the point leader or if Buchnevich would catch up, if someone would. And I said that Panarin would by the time he gets back, and I'm wrong, because Buchnevich now leads the team in points. So I will say that that's awesome for him. He's been consistent. His two-way game has definitely impressed me, probably more than anything this season as he's continued to grow as a young player. But then KREIDER with a goal, and he's definitely the big topic of discussion. The Rangers overall had a very strong game, winning 3-2 against the Sabres. But then getting on to game 21, they have a blowout win against the Devils. But if you would have asked me 10 minutes into that first period, if they had any chance of doing what they did, I would have said, you're joking. There's absolutely no way. The Rangers had a very slow start to the game. Jack Hughes scores, surprise, surprise, to get things open. But then the floodgates really open. KREIDER scores in 3 different ways, 3 straight goals for another hat trick. His second hat trick in an 8-day span, I believe 2 over a 5-game span. Remarkable what KREIDER has been doing. In my mind, I know you know this. I've been preaching him as he definitely needs to be the next captain for this team. Personally, I've been saying this for 6 to 12 months now. I know a lot of people are on the Mika train in the offseason, and don't get me wrong, I thought Mika would be a great option too. But when you look at leadership and you look at qualities, yes, he has his inconsistencies, but you don't have to be the best player on the team in order to be captain. And KREIDER, in my mind, between his utilization, how much of a veteran he has been in both playoff and regular season experience, just makes a lot of sense. So to see him hot and scoring the fashion that he does was fantastic. Strome in that game had 2 assists as well. He's a great topic that will be getting into. And Igor did get hurt in that game, as we know, looked brutal. When he first got hurt, it really looked like that was either something with his back, something with his groin, something with his leg. It was not looking good. He couldn't put any weight on his leg, as we know. But luckily, shortly after that, the next day, it was reported that he is day-to-day with, I believe, a mild groin strain. So luckily, it doesn't look as serious as what it initially sold us when we saw him hurt. It was definitely a big scare. And as soon as all these guys are starting to get healthy, between Kakko back in the lineup now, Hedel, and then Trouba getting closer and closer at this point, to see Igor hurt, I was like, of course, so this is absolutely our luck. And I felt terrible. I was really worried about Igor, but it looks like that he'll be back sooner than later. But then getting on to the second to last game was against the Devils again, and the Rangers blow them out 6-3 this time, so 12 goals in 2 games against the rivals. Gauthier had 2 assists, but only had around 10 minutes played, because that's what happens when you're stuck in the Quinn bin, right? Then when you look at others, Strome had 2 goals on the game, a strong night for him. Foxy, a beautiful end-to-end goal to get things started, I believe, on the power play, and he also had an assist, 1 goal, 1 assist, and then Hayek had his second career goal. He now has 2 career goals, both against the Devils, so take that as you will. And Hedel had a goal and assist. He's been looking great, in my opinion. And Kakko with that beautiful assist, I know that you'll want to touch on plenty in a second, from that takeaway to set up, and that was just awesome. And then getting on to last night's game, at the time of recording this, everything took a turn for the worse. The Rangers now with Trouba back in the lineup, really a couple weeks earlier than expected, because he broke his thumb, as we know. There was an expectation he'd be gone at least a month to 6 weeks. He comes back in just around 3 weeks, not even fully, and he's back in the lineup. But the Rangers, Mika Zibanejad breaks his slump. He scores early on the power play within the first 2 minutes against the Penguins, but then everything just completely collapsed defensively for the Rangers, as we've seen in other games, but this held true through the majority of the game. And a lot of guys did not stand out well. Lindgren definitely had a rough game. Trouba didn't look great. I know it was his first game back. But there was a lot of defensive woes, both offensively with the offense and the defense. So I'm going to want to know your thoughts. The Rangers lose 5-1. Georgiev gave up 3 goals on 6 shots. They bring in Keith Kincaid. He actually looked really solid. If it wasn't for Kincaid, I thought that game would have been upwards of 7-1, at least. Kincaid definitely stood on his head when needed. And Georgiev had another rough outing, even with the defensive woes. So what's your initial thoughts on those games? I know that you want to touch on Strome, Kakko, and all of them, and the latest game for the Rangers, ending their 3-game winning streak.
Like I said, I don't think a lot of people expected us to have a 3-game winning streak this week. But the games against the Devils, I think the Rangers came out flying. And something I've noticed this season in particular, if the Rangers get on the board early, they usually get sort of like a push, like someone's giving them a push, and they tend to play with a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But if they concede a goal, then it completely switches momentum. And we saw that yesterday. They scored 3 goals. I think it felt like in the span of 2 minutes. And I know there's a lot of criticism of Georgiev. And he conceded 3 goals on 6 shots, which is bad. But I've seen Shesterkin give up 2 goals on 2 shots in the final of the World Juniors, and he turned out fine. Looking at those goals, to be honest, yes, I wish he would have gotten the Kapanen shot on the breakaway. You expect a goalie to at least get something on a breakaway, and I think that's Georgiev's biggest weakness. One-on-ones where he just doesn't really engage early, and the other 2 goals, like the first goal, there's 3 players in between him and the puck. I don't really blame a goalie for that. I mean, he's being screened by 3 different players. And then the third goal with Crosby is very similar to the Lafreniere goal against the Devils, to be honest, where it's a snipe diagonal over the glove. When Lafreniere scored that goal, we as Ranger fans were like, oh, what a great goal, what a great snipe, this and that. And then Crosby scores a similar goal, and we're all, oh, Georgiev should have had it. So, I don't know. Maybe one out of those 3 he should have had. But the biggest issue for me yesterday is that Keith Kincaid was not the starting goalie. You have a back-to-back. Why is he not playing?
That's fair.
I mean, the Colorado Avalanche have their issues in goal as well, and they have a back-to-back. And they are not afraid to play the goalie. I think his name is Hunter Liska. I don't think anyone has ever heard of him. They're confident enough to play him. If your backup goes down and you have your starting goalie, I understand you want to play that goalie in both back-to-back games. You trust your starting goalie to pull that out of the hat. But when you have 2 backups, there's no reason to play your backup twice. It was a bad decision. And it's not like Keith Kincaid is some AHL goalie or some junior goalie that has no experience. He has a .905 save percentage in the NHL. He may not be a superstar goalie, but he's good enough to play the second game on a back-to-back. So that was my biggest issue yesterday. Losing to the Penguins in itself is not really an issue to me. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't really be bothered by that. Whether you lose 3-1 or 5-1, it's the same thing. So with that out of the way, the negative stuff out of the way, let's focus on the 3 games earlier this week. The Sabres game where Buchnevich, which was absolutely on fire, should have had 2 goals, but the second one bounced off of Lafreniere's shin. So good for him. You know, ugly goals count as well. And Lafreniere, I think he had 5 points in 4 games. He had a 2-point game against the second game against the Devils.
Yep.
So he's finally getting those points in. And a lot of fans are saying he's finally getting used to, you know, being back on the ice and he hasn't played for 8 months. But if you look at the lines and the way he's been used, it's just a coincidence, but I think there's a little bit more to it, that his production starts to pick up the moment he plays on the same line for 5 games in a row. He's put on the Zibanejad line with Buchnevich, and he plays with them for 5 straight games. There's no demoting. There's no shuffling the lines and him being put on the line with 2 different players he has no chemistry with. No, he's being put on a line, and Quinn, for once, stuck with that line for 5 games. And for some reason, Lafreniere has 5 points in 4 games in that span. Yesterday, he didn't score, although I think he was essential on that Zibanejad goal, because if Lafreniere doesn't join the rush, it's a lot harder for Zibanejad to convince the goalie he's going to shoot. So he did definitely impact that goal, even though he didn't get an assist. But then he gets demoted to the 3rd line, and Hedl gets bumped up to the 2nd line to play on the wing. It made no sense. I mean, allow players to have a mediocre game without demoting them immediately. I'm so over the whole line changes in the middle of a game. It annoys me. But Lafreniere had a really good week. And of course, Kaapo Kakko back in the lineup is a really big positive for the Rangers. Had that huge takeaway that led to the Strome goal against the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's come back from COVID. He actually had COVID. It wasn't a false positive. He actually battled COVID for a week and a half, and he comes back into the lineup, and it looks like he hasn't missed a beat. It's amazing. And yesterday, even though he wasn't as noticeable as other games, he did have 2 takeaways, bringing his total to 16 in 16 games. His takeaway per 60 is now the highest in the league, and it's just amazing. It's amazing to watch this guy play and just recover the puck, like force turnovers by being present on the ice. And this is the type of Kaapo, this is the Kaapo Kakko that the Rangers saw in his draft year. This is the Kakko that they scouted. He's playing with the confidence that he had when he was back in Finland. And I think if he keeps this up for a couple more games, the goals will come. But the underlying numbers for him look really good, and I'm really happy with that. And then, we already touched on KREIDER, 2 hat-tricks in back-to-back road games, which was the first time since Tony Granato in, I think, 1989. But Ryan Strome, I just want to quickly touch on Ryan Strome because he's getting a lot of shit from Ranger fans. But every year it seems like Ryan Strome is doing something, and Ranger fans have one goal, and that is to find excuses as to why he's putting up certain numbers. Like 2018-19, we acquire him in a trade for Ryan Spooner, and he sets a career high in goals with 18 in 63 games playing with Jesper Fast and Vlad Nemesnikov mostly. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
but
that is.
Then there was all this talk about, but his shooting percentage is so high, he's not going to be able to keep that up, and which is in itself in a vacuum a valid point. But then the following season, he plays with Panarin, and he puts up 50-plus points, but also Panarin puts up career highs in goals and assists playing with Strome in only 69 games. Mm-hmm. So it's not I feel that there's more to it than just Panarin making Strome better. Strome had a positive impact on Panarin as well. Panarin putting up career highs in only 69 games played, that's huge. And then this season, even though it's a small sample size, Panarin goes down, KREIDER is bumped up to Strom's line, and he scores 9 goals in 6 games being paired with Strom after the first 16 games where it didn't really click. So if you look at those 3 things in a vacuum, you can make excuses for all 3. But if you look at it combined and you look at Ryan Strom's tenure as a Ranger, we should just be happy with what he's providing. He's not being paid to be a top line center. He's not making $9 million a year. His first 2 seasons, he was on 3.1, and this season and next season he's on 4.5. And for the money he gets paid, he delivers more than we could expect, to be honest. So Strom is a positive impact on this team, and I think that needs to be said because I'm getting a little bit tired of all the Strom criticism on Twitter and on other social media. Because, yeah, he's not a perfect player, but he's not paid to be. He's not expected to be a perfect player. If he was making $8 million, $9 million a year, then yes, then the criticism is warranted. Mika Zibanejad having an off year just highlights how shallow this team is down the middle. But if Zibanejad's having a good year and Strom is the second center behind him, he's perfectly capable of filling that role. Anyway, that was my piece on Strom. Other than that, Trouba's back from injury. Miller's back from the COVID list. I'm quite happy with what happened the last week. Some minor issues like Gauthier still having a low time on ice, even though I think the game where he only had 9 minutes or something and had 2 assists.
Yeah, my point exactly. Yeah.
I think he spent time in the locker room being checked up by Jim Ramsey because something happened.
Oh, okay.
But the fact that people brought this up online is, it doesn't come out of the blue that people bring this up because it has happened in previous games where Quinn literally said, I should have played Julien Gauthier more. But Gauthier getting 2 assists in that one game with the Hedl goal being like 90% his work. He caused a turnover off the faceoff in the offensive zone, skates around the net, passes it to Hedl, who then makes a great move and scores, but that play was all Julien Gauthier. So he's finally getting into that groove as well. And then we saw some surprising decisions by David Quinn. When Kako came back, you have to scratch someone. And it turns out that it was Colin Blackwell at first. I think was Colin Blackwell.
No. I believe it was why am I blanking right now? PDG, and then it was Blackwell last night.
Okay, so yeah, the game on Saturday, Di Giuseppe was scratched, and then yesterday it was Blackwell. Personally, if I would have to choose between players on the bottom 6 who to scratch, I would have scratched Brendan Lemieux because I don't think he brings what fans think he brings. He has this reputation of being a gritty player, a tough guy that brings some physicality to the game. But I haven't seen it in almost a year from Lemieux. He's just out there skating around. He's never engaged in the play. When he has the puck, he dumps it, not even into the corner. He dumps it straight at the opposition goalie. It's so frustrating to watch. And the only fight he has was after the game was over against the Bruins, which is it's such a waste of time.
I know. Yeah, we already went over that. You're right,
though. We touched on that already, and. It's not that I think Brendan Lemieux is not capable of playing in the NHL. I just think out of those players, out of Rooney, Blackwell, Di Giuseppe, Lemieux, I think the other 3 have played better than Lemieux lately. It's not that he's bad. It's just that he's not better than the other 3.
Yeah, and that's normally a good problem to have when you have numerous guys that are at least performing and one sticks out, then you're like, okay, but I understand the frustration at times with Quinn where it's like, okay, initially we thought Blackwell was going to be scratched on the Saturday game, and then it ended up being PDG. So we're like, okay, so PDG gets scratched and then Rangers end up winning that game. Now, do I think that if Blackwell played Sunday when he was scratched that the Rangers would have won? I don't necessarily think that, but you do have to wonder that just scratching him almost for the sake of scratching him. I know Quinn hasn't loved his play, but at the end of the day, this is like PDG, a guy who came in on around a $750K contract, that had little expectations. Even cracking the roster wasn't a certain thing to start the year. He comes in, he plays above expectations, is thriving alongside far better players than himself in the top 6. So he's like, oh, let's continue it. But as soon as it dies out, then you already have to start toying things around. I'm like, give these guys some breathing room. That's all I really have to say. Blackwell's only been playing a handful of games. Like, if anything, if we're basing things off of point production per se, then PDG should have been benched a long time ago. Shortly after Heedle got hurt, he did nothing point-wise. I'm not saying he was playing bad. He was in a different situation. He was playing with Howden, with some other guys centering him, but he went from being on like a point streak of like 4 games or so with Heedle, and then as soon as he got hurt, nothing. All you heard was crickets with him for the next how many games until Heedle returned. So I do get frustrated by that personally as well. I'm not going to just bash Quinn this entire time. I'm happy that him and the Rangers are definitely trending in an upward direction, that they're actually winning games without Panarin. Give credit where credit is due. That's unbelievably important because the Rangers, for a bit, were not doing anything without Breadman. So I'm very happy to see that. I'm very happy to see Strome performing, as you alluded to as well. And people do need to give credit to Strome where credit is due. Strome is a guy that can definitely leave you frustrated. He started off this season really poor. We were joking about it, how, like, come on, why can't you even bury these empty nets when you get numerous ones in a game, right? There was a big ongoing problem with him with Panarin, but it almost felt to an extent that, as we were talking about, the whole Rangers team to start the year were just not on the same pace. They weren't on the same level, and not all the same guys are. Zibanejad scored yesterday, yeah, but he still hasn't been the Zibanejad that we have been hoping for. Same thing with some other players in this lineup. So when Panarin, even though he was around a point per game plus, he wasn't looking like the Breadman from last season to start the year. It took a couple games to really get him a routine. And now to have these guys stepping up between Strome, KREIDER, etc., and now with Kakko back in the lineup, and I think you said it already plenty, how Kakko's just looking tremendous. I think he's easily probably the most overlooked guy in this roster right now. What he's doing defensively is tremendous. And I know that people are giving grapes, so he only has a handful of points. I'm like, think about other guys that are in similar positions to him. One of your favorite guys that isn't a Ranger, right? Barkov. Look at what he did early in his career. I know that through, I believe, his second season or so, he started off slow in point production. A lot of guys have. Mark Scheifele's another example as well that really took his time. I know that these are centermen. I'm just using examples here, but especially more defensively sound guys like Barkov and the fellow Finn, he had to take his time, and he's one of the best two-way centers in the game now. Kakko's definitely on pace in my mind to being one of the best two-way forwards in the game. And once that scoring continues to go, we'll be great.
It's not just Barkov. There are others too. I mean, I spent some time looking it up. Like in their D+2 season, so the second season after being drafted, after 6 games, Pierre-Luc Dubois had 2 goals, 2 assists, same as Kakko. Barkov had 2 goals, 1 assist. Kotkaniemi, 2 goals, 1 assist. Jordan Staal, 1 goal, 1 assist. Malkin, James van Riemsdyk, Bobby Ryan didn't even play in the NHL in their D+2 season. So maybe we should just be a little bit more patient when it comes to production and just look at the things that are going well. And regarding Malkin, from Riemsdyk, and Ryan, you cannot really compare their rookie seasons to Kakko's rookie season, because Kakko's rookie season was at age 18, and these three had their rookie season at age 20. That's 2 years later. That's a weird comparison.
Oh, and the circumstances were different too.
And the circumstances were different, but I don't really want to use the whole COVID thing as an excuse. I don't think.
No. I'm not. I'm saying in how long he played straight. That's what I'm focusing on in particular.
Okay.
Kakko literally went like a year straight, give or take, playing hockey.
Yeah. And he had all the transatlantic flights that tire you out. I mean, I do those transatlantic flights, and I always need 2 days to recover. So I'm pretty sure it affects everyone. And Erik Karlsson actually mentioned it when they had the games in Stockholm, how the entire team was exhausted when they came back to Ottawa and had to play an NHL game back home again. So
of course, why wouldn't you be? Especially if you're doing a long flight like that. It takes a lot out of you by doing nothing, believe it or not.
But, when it comes to young players, I like to focus on the positives and then just expect the other things to come. And when you look at Kakko, his you know how takeaways are calculated, right?
What do you mean by calculated? I know when you look up giveaways, takeaways, and the ratio, I know how all that works.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like his first game back with Kakko, he is right around the same type of takeaways per 60 number as Mark Stone, who we all know is one of the best two-way players in the game.
Exactly.
I think Mark Stone's is at 3.63 per 60. Kako's is 3.91 per 60. So Kako has
That's insane.
more takeaways per 60 minutes than Mark Stone. And the reason I use per 60 is because
that's a game.
It's well, that too, but it also takes ice time into account. Someone who's on the ice 17 minutes a game has more opportunities to have takeaways than someone who only plays 9 minutes.
That's fair. So it's even more impressive when you look at what he's been doing, because his ice time has been very up and down throughout the year.
It has been, well, lately it's been very consistent, but
to start the year it wasn't.
But looking at those takeaways, and it's not just that, it's also the other stuff he does. There was a video that Rangers on MSG tweeted where he's around the boards against the Devils. He takes away the puck and he's just skating back and forth, and they cannot get him off the puck, almost Philip Forsberg-like. And this is, and I said this before, this is the Capo Kakko that I remember from his days in Finland. This is the confident Kakko that just is so strong on the puck that you need almost two players to take the puck away from him. That was a play where he was skating towards Blackwood in net, and one of the defensemen, I cannot remember who it was, one of the Devils defensemen was holding him and then didn't even slow him down. He drew the penalty, but the hold barely slowed him down.
Yeah.
He's so strong on the puck. And if those little things are already part of his game, which wasn't the case last season, then those points will come. And I know that a lot of fans are like, oh, he only has 2 goals and 2 assists, but there's so much more to look at. And if you focus on him, if you zoom in on him during a game, you see the impact he has. And one of the takeaways that led to the Strome goal is a perfect example. You know, he tracks the puck, he sticks out his stick, and it causes a turnover that leads straight to a goal. He did this a couple of weeks ago against the Capitals, which I still think is his best game of the season. The first game the Rangers wore their reverse retro jerseys. He had, I think, 5 breakaways. He had 3 takeaways, one of them coming out of the box where he immediately strips the puck and causes a transition the other way. I'm just really happy with what I'm seeing of Kakko, and I hope the points will come. But so far, comparing Kakko to other players in their second full season in the NHL, I think he's right up there with what Barkov did at the time. They had to go through a similar transition, you know, transitioning from life in Finland to life in North America, different style of hockey. So I think Kakko will be fine. And he's only 20 years old. I'm just happy that finally, you know, the young kids are showing something. Gauthier getting his assists. Miller has been a revelation on defense. Kakko and Lafreniere are now finally comfortable and getting into their game. The only thing we need now is our star players to get going. We've had that with KREIDER. Panarin's is on a leave of absence, so we'd have to wait for him. But the only thing we're missing now is Zibanejad. If Zibanejad can get back to that form that he was in last season, or at least close to it, then this team can surprise a lot of people. And we're going to need it, because the next 17 games, out of the next 17 games, 15 of them are against teams ranked higher than us.
Yeah.
So we'll have a tough schedule ahead of us in the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Basically, we close out the season.
Almost closing out the season, yes. So we need Zibanejad to really come back to his old form and hopefully get Panarin back soon, which causes another issue, because the return of Panarin paired with this is basically Rooney and Blackwell establishing themselves as role players on the team. You know, when Kakko and Panarin were not in the lineup, it wasn't a problem, because, you know, you have spots for them without having to scratch another player. Now Kakko is back and you have to scratch Di Giuseppe or Blackwell. Next week, hopefully Panarin is back. You have to scratch 2 of them. Who's it going to be? And you brought up a lack of production. If you go by lack of production, then that has to be Brett Howden, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. If we are basing it off of production, you're absolutely correct. But we're not basing it on just production with Howden. Remember that his defensive game. You know what Quinn's gonna say. We know this.
Exactly. But the same thing goes for someone like Kevin Rooney. Kevin Rooney plays a solid game on the third line with Hedel now, taking some face-offs for him. He's strong on the penalty kill. Blackwell had some really good games, getting some vital assists on Lafreniere's first goal and Miller's first goal. Had the goal on Lafreniere's first assist, I think, as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
wait,
he's
actually,
been.
no. No, he assisted Strom, I think.
Oh, and then his second assist was the Blackwell goal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Blackwell has been good. I don't think he's been good enough to protect him for the expansion draft, like some people are suggesting now, because I don't think Blackwell is someone worth the expansion or the protection slot for the expansion draft.
Oh yeah, I mean, right now I agree, no doubt.
But even before, when he was on this point streak, even then I said, I wouldn't protect him because he's a 27-year-old journeyman turning 28 this month. He's on his fourth organization in 5 years. Those players, unless they make like a really big leap, like Anton Strawman, are not really worth protecting in an expansion draft.
Yeah, and I want to add though too how expansion is something that we'll be talking about further, especially as we get towards the end of the season and into that time, because that's going to take up a lot of time and focus, especially as the season winds down. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But I wanted to touch on a little bit before we kind of wrap up and what is next for their week ahead. Again, some more on KREIDER, because having him titled here, I'm going to have it for this going to be probably, KREIDER on fire, something along those lines, because this was a huge week for him, and it definitely should not go overlooked. If you look at his pace right now in 23 games, he has 13 goals, total 16 points, only 3 assists. It hasn't been one really spread the apples this year, but that's okay. I know that KREIDER has been a very streaky goal scorer in his career, and the only thing that I ask out of him personally is that if we're going to not necessarily score every game, which we all know that's never going to happen, at least don't have it where you're really hot and then really cold. I think that's something that has been an issue with KREIDER in the past. So if we get consistency out of him, which will be key. He's on pace for upwards of 30-goal season right now in a 56-game year. That is nothing to slouch at, especially with Panarin out. So I just want to give another huge credit to KREIDER, because having 2 hat-tricks in a short period of time is tremendous. The way he's doing them is great. As we talked about how happy we are with how the power play is finally being utilized to an extent, with having that guy in front and actually moving the puck around. KREIDER's been great both 5-on-5 and special teams. So I'm very happy for him. I hope that this consistency continues. Now he's won a couple games without a goal, but I'm hoping that this week he at least has a couple, and then that will be a good pace going forward. Lafreniere, again, he's going to be interesting with his utilization, especially when Panarin is back, because it doesn't look like it's going to be too long from now. Again, we don't have an exact timetable, but it doesn't look like it's going to be that far off. So I'm curious if Lafreniere is in fact going to stay on the top line, or if he's going to end up being bumped to the third line, because then you're going to move KREIDER back with Zibanejad and Buchnevich. What are you going to do there? There's a lot of question marks into how the lineup is going to be constructed once Panarin is back. It's a good problem to have, but you just hope it doesn't mess with some chemistry and with the younger guys, especially actually starting to find their groove. Because as much as Zibanejad and Howden haven't necessarily been putting up the points offensively, I will give them the benefit of the doubt here. In plenty of games that we've seen this season where the Rangers have looked great defensively, not so much in their last game at the time of recording this, but a defensive structure from this team has been solid with the offensive core group, including Howden on the penalty kill. Definitely, he brings a speed to that element as well. And Zibanejad. Zibanejad's been huge on the penalty kill. And just with his overall, he's had some great takeaways. I know, again, the offense, you need more from him. It's been concerning. I think Zibanejad is the biggest X factor if the Rangers actually push to gain closer to a playoff spot this season, or if they really start to reel back and end up around, 5+ games out. I think he is the biggest key factor outside the goaltending situation. And Georgiev, I wanted to know your quick stance on him before we go forward, because he's been very shaky this season, to put it lightly. He didn't have a terrible outing in the second game of the back-to-back games against the Devils, where he only gave up 3 goals and around 27 shots, I believe, but 3 goals on 7 shots, even with how poor the defense was and how inconsistent he's been throughout the season. There's a clear difference between him and Igor. There's no doubting that. Igor is definitely the number 1 on this club. So what is your initial stance on Georgiev, and do you feel that the Rangers might regret in the end not trading him away last season when his stock was so high at a point?
I think Georgiev is a good backup, a fringe starter in the NHL.
I agree.
I think the same goes for Keith Kincaid, to be honest. I think they're on the same level. They're good enough to help your team through a couple of weeks where your starter is out. Um, are you comfortable enough to have him as a starter for an entire season? I don't know. But Georgiev is, how old is he? 24, 25?
Yeah, he's still in his early 20s.
Still relatively young for a goalie. He's only been playing in the NHL for 3 years. He only came over in 2018, I think, or 2017, from TPS. Um, played for the same team as Kako.
Yep.
Funny.
I knew you were gonna say that. That was Wayne.
When I said TPS, I'm like, okay, I have to bring this up. Yeah, and actually practiced together during the off season back in Finland.
Yep.
So I think Georgiev is a good backup goalie with maybe some potential still to be a starter in the league, same as Antti Ranta and Kem Talbot had at one point as a Rangers backup. I think we just shouldn't expect Georgiev to be the same as Igor Shesterkin. And why this coaching staff decided to go with alternating the goalies to start the season, I still don't understand. Because I don't think anyone who has seen these two goalies in the last few years would argue that they are on the same level or they are even close. Shesterkin is a legitimate starter in the NHL, and Georgiev just is an ideal backup. Yeah, he gets paid a little bit too much for a backup, but you can afford it while your starter is still on an entry level deal, I guess. Regarding the trading of Georgiev, if Gorton didn't get the offer he wanted, he wasn't going to trade him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And Gorton is a good GM. I'm really happy with what Gorton has done since he joined the Rangers, since he took over from Glenn Sather in 2015. He's been here for 6 years now. He's orchestrated this rebuild, and I think he's done a great job. And if we get an offer for Georgiev this summer that he is happy with, he will take it. But he's not going to sell low or have another GM take him, take him to the cleaners and try to get a bargain. Gorton is just not that type of GM. I would say the only two trades he's made that are questionable or reason to have a debate are the Eric Stahl trade and the Ryan McDonough trade with JT Miller, although we still don't know how Brett Howden and Libor Hayek turn out. So on the other end, this is something I wanted to bring up, by the way. One of the best trades, and I think this is even a better trade than the Zibanejad trade. I think Jeff Gorton's best trade as a Rangers general manager was the Rick Nash trade 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my. As soon as that happened, I was ecstatic. A lot of people didn't seem to understand just how valuable that will be. I'll let you break it down, but yeah, no, it's been a win since day one.
Rick Nash at the time, I think, was 34 years old or almost 34. He only played 11 games after he was traded for the Boston Bruins. I think he was injured for the playoffs. He didn't play in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that led to his retirement because of his concussion issues.
And he retired. So he's been retired for 3 years. We received Matt Bolesky, who we can skip, a first-round pick, which we'll get to in a minute, Ryan Spooner, which we then flipped for Ryan Strome, brilliant, and Ryan Lindgren.
Yeah, I heard that guy's kind of good. I don't know.
That first-round pick was paired with a second to trade up to get K'Andre Miller. So out of the Rick Nash trade, we basically got, for this season, Ryan Strome, Ryan Lindgren, and K'Andre Miller, who have combined for 32 points in after 23 games in the season. That's not bad for a player that was going to retire 6 weeks after you traded him.
Yeah, I mean, granted, the Rangers did luck out in that situation. They never wanted a situation where Nash didn't play well, but they did luck out in the sense of truly winning that from the get-go. Nash only had the couple games. So weird seeing him in Boston uniform too. Mm-hmm. I can't get over that, honestly. But it was short-lived. As we know, he unfortunately had the concussion issues that led to his retirement. But, Lindgren, I was excited about from the get-go. His highlights, all I saw was this guy just throwing his body around in college. And I was like, oh, okay, he looks interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to bring. Definitely bring some grit to this defense, which at the time still didn't have much leading into McDonough's departure. But to see him and Keandre as well, smart move by Rangers. And I agree, that was probably their biggest trade outside of Zibanejad. One could argue that maybe it isn't as big as Zibanejad, but I understand your stance on it, especially because of what's to come with both of them. Lynn Grinstow very young. Keandre is just his rookie year, and he looks like that he very well can be a top 10, top 15 defenseman over these next couple of years. Him and Lindgren, it's kind of funny. They didn't have a good game yesterday. Both of them had some defensive errors. Lindgren definitely stood out a little bit more, in my opinion, at times. But all in all, when you're looking at the season as a whole and what they've done, it's very exciting to see how much the Rangers have benefited from a deal that maybe at the time wasn't looking strong, in the sense of just so much uncertainty. You need to make sure that, one, you're drafting right and you develop the guys right. Just because you draft a star player or acquire one that's still a prospect doesn't mean that they're going to pan out. They could pan out in another organization, but there's no guarantee that they're going to pan out with you. So I think the Rangers' approach there was tremendous. And I also think, with saying that, is there anything that you would like to add before we kind of wrap up and get on to next week's schedule?
You mentioned developing prospects. One thing I want to touch on here is because we've seen Oliver Wahlstrom play really well for the Islanders, right? This season.
Yes, he has actually played very well for them in an increased role.
Yep. Really nice goals. And Joel Farabee, who was drafted in that same draft, I think 15th or 16th overall by the Flyers.
My buddy played in the same tournament in Boston with him a couple years ago. And he always jokes. He's like, we weren't that far off. Like jokingly saying.
Geographically, you weren't far off. You were like a few yards away.
Yeah.
The Rangers drafted Vitaly Kravtsov, and I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think the Rangers have been getting a lot of flack for not drafting the right players. I think the bigger issue for the Rangers is developing the players. It doesn't matter as much who you draft, in my opinion. It matters how you develop them.
100%.
It cannot be a coincidence that every third and fourth round pick that the Tampa Bay Lightning are drafting magically develop, and when they play with the Syracuse Crunch, you have Olivier, Gord, Tyler Johnson, who was undrafted, but Andre Palat, Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli. It's not a coincidence that all these players develop in the same environment. So I've been thinking about this the last couple of weeks, and I'm wondering if Joel Farabee would have had the same impact on the Rangers had he been part of the Rangers organization for the last 3 years.
No.
And probably not. And I wonder if, had they left Vitaly Kravtsov in Russia for 3-4 years, would he have developed a different way? I think so. I think that would have been the better option anyway.
I will say this, however, though, just to counter that, Kravtsov luckily is in a great place right now. And I think looking back, even though that things were a little delayed or a little overwhelming at first with his arrival in the AHL, because he wasn't lighting up the lamp like everyone expected, even though they shouldn't necessarily expect that a guy that hasn't been necessarily a full point per game playing in the KHL up to that point, right? He was putting up strong numbers in the VHL, but he was still getting himself known and was on pace for his age, but still wasn't anything crazy. So I think him having that experience now, and I know that you like to say that it isn't as much of a factor with North American ice and everything. I get it, but at least having him get that taste already, like it isn't completely foreign to him, in my mind, will benefit him as he arrives with the Rangers at some point this season.
When he comes over this year, it'll be the second time he makes that transition.
Yes.
So the shock wouldn't be as big as it was the first time. Yes.
Correct.
But I think what the Rangers need to worry about is making sure that they have the right environment to develop these prospects. If you look at the most successful prospects, right, it's usually the guys who developed either in Europe or like Buchnevich and Shesterkin, or in college, like Adam Fox, Ryan Lindgren, Chris Kreider, Kevin Hayes, Ryan McDonough, Brady Shea played a year in Hartford, but was playing in college for 3 full seasons after being drafted. So they do benefit from that whole college route a lot. And Carl Hagelin is a great example of that as well. Played 4 full seasons in Michigan,
Yep.
and made the jump from the AHL to the NHL after like a month. And it's great to see. I just wish that Hartford was a little bit more successful in developing their prospects as well, because I feel that's lacking a little bit. I don't have the answer for it. I'm just observing, and this is my opinion. So, but man, I would love to be, in the locker room at the Syracuse Crunch to see what's going on there, just to see what's happening.
Yeah, be a little spy in there. Actually, write some notes
Yeah,
down. Be like, all right, we'll bring this over.
just be a fly on the wall and try to learn from it. And there are some small things, and this is the last thing I'll say before we wrap it up.
Sure.
There are some really small things that other organizations are doing that I'm a little bit jealous of. The Washington Capitals hired Michael Pekka to help Evgeny Kuznetsov on faceoffs.
I love that. I would love if there was some more individual hires like that.
How have the Rangers not looked at this as a possibility? How the Rangers, I think, are 30th or 31st in the league in faceoff wins this season, or win percentage. It's crazy. How have we not addressed this? Do we not have any former players that were great on faceoffs that can help out our young players?
I wonder what Brian Boyle's up to right about now.
Kuznetsov said it himself. Michael Pekka told him Michael Pekka taught him how to stand for a faceoff. And Kuznetsov's like, I've been doing it wrong all these years. Just the way you stand, the way your body is positioned can already make an impact on your win percentage on the dot. So I don't know. Maybe the Rangers should reach out to Brian Boyle or Dominic Moore, or I don't know, find someone. Craig McTavish was pretty good at it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that idea. I'm glad that you brought up Pekka too. He's someone that is definitely an interesting pick for the Capitals. And it's like, all right, if you're going to bring him in specifically for one player, if he's willing, why not? So it's going to be interesting if that kind of opens the floodgates a little bit for opposing teams in the NHL. More of a wide variety where maybe the majority at some point over the next year or two, a couple of years or more, in a position where they're doing individual hires to really help the lack of production for a player. It's something that maybe they've been struggling with their entire life. Maybe a guy has always been a natural centerman, but he's always struggled on faceoffs, but they love him there because they know how he utilizes the center position outside of faceoffs. Everything that comes with his two-way game, whatever it may be, just being productive. But I think that's a great point. I would love it if the Rangers went down a similar route like that.
It's other teams too. The Maple Leafs hired Nick Antropov, who's
I remember him.
To help European players transition to life in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the Toronto Maple Leafs have a big advantage that their AHL team is playing in the same city.
Oh, of course.
It would be cool to have like the AHL affiliate play in New York City.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier for players. You're much closer to the team. But I doubt that the Wolfpack will leave Hartford anytime soon. But I see all these other teams making these decisions, and I'm thinking, why aren't the Rangers doing this? They made some decisions that I'm happy with, like hiring Tuomo Ruutu for player development.
I was going to actually mention that, especially when you're talking about fellow Finns or other Europeans that could use some advice.
Jed Ortmeyer is focused on the kids in college, like Eric Ciccolini, because he himself went to college.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is what Ciccolini told me. He learned a lot from Jed Ortmeyer just on what life in college is like as a hockey player. And that's so vital to have in your organization. And I'm not saying the Rangers aren't doing it. I just feel they're not doing it enough. Do more.
That's fair.
What I
Yeah, no, I agree. I would like to see them do something more creative like that down the line, and they should. When you're in New York at the end of the day, and you have all these creative minds as it is, you can't tell me that they aren't within the Rangers organization. I really hope that they go down a route that will help them individually with their players. It could make a drastic difference.
If your owner can afford to pay Brad Richards $1 million a year until 2026, when he hasn't been on the team for 7 years, I'm pretty sure you have the money to hire some additional personnel.
No, you're absolutely right. I completely agree. But we hit the nail on the head with all the games. Again, this was a week that I felt that we really could have went longer with, but just for the sake of time and everything, we'll cut it off there. So now when we look at the schedule for the Rangers coming up, This is going to be a very interesting one with them. Still without Igor, we don't know exactly when he is going to return. But as of now, Georgiev, the starter, there's some natural concerns there with his performance. And the Rangers are going to be right back in the fire this week. They play the Penguins again on Tuesday in the evening. And then on Thursday and Saturday, they're in Boston, just like that they were for this Pittsburgh matchup again. So tough week ahead for the Rangers. When I'm looking at them, in my personal opinion, the predictions aren't going to be as strong. I don't think that they're going to go 3-0. I have a feeling that they're going to go 1-2 this week, barring a Zibanejad emergence where he actually starts to get hot off of that one goal. Trouba, I'm not sure exactly how much more he's going to bring to this blue line. It almost feels like maybe it's more harm than good. If I look at Gordon going back, and I've said this plenty, and there's two signings that will always stand out to me as of now that have never been in favor of, at least long term. It didn't take me long to really change my mind on Trouba, was Trouba and Brendan Smith. Both those contracts, respectively, I think are probably the biggest moves that Gordon has made that are not really faring the Rangers well and haven't to this point. I know it's early with Trouba still, but again, I've seen more negative than positive in my personal opinion with how his game has adapted. So you have them. I'm going 1-2. What's your prediction on these upcoming games for the Rangers?
I'm going to go 1-1-1.
Of course you are.
But what I'm interested in, I want to see on Thursday what the reaction is going to be when we take the ice against the Bruins. Because the last time we played the Bruins, there was the Lemieux fight after the buzzer.
Yep.
Is this team going to rally behind Georgiev? Because it was Georgiev that was that Nick Ritchie landed on, right?
Yes. And Nick Ritchie's a big boy. Like, he's probably one of the worst forwards for the Bruins to fall on Georgiev. So, yeah, it didn't look great.
And Nick Ritchie is also the one that bumped into Shesterkin's head when he skated through the crease in the previous game.
Yep.
I wonder what the response will be, and I guess we'll see on Thursday if Lemieux is the player Ranger fans think he is. Because if he is, then he should do something about it. You know, this is what Ranger fans are saying about him. He is there to protect your players, you know, like an enforcer back in the day, sort of. So we'll see on Thursday what happens.
Yeah, Frederick is a guy that is definitely going to spark some things. Yeah,
don't get me started on Trent Frederick. Trent Frederick should have been suspended for what he pulled against Ovechkin.
Oh, I know. I know. Yeah.
I'm not going to justify what Ovechkin did, spearing him in the groin. That's bad. But if you cross-check Ovechkin 2-3 times and he retaliates, and then you dive onto the ice, and your first instinct is to turn around and look at the referee, then no. Just leave that stuff in soccer, man. Just that doesn't belong on the rink.
I know. He's doing everything he can to, bring the right calls to the Boston. He's a pest. He's awfully similar to Marchand, but he's actually willing to drop the gloves. That's the difference with him. He's going out there because he knows that this is the easiest way for him to stay in the lineup. No one's denying that. So, yeah, but I expect some duels to be happening probably with him more than anyone else in those two games. So we'll see if
I'm looking forward to Buchnevich and Marchand playing against each other again.
Yeah, no, I am too. I don't want to see Buchnevich fight necessarily, but
but sprinkle in a little Lindgren there, and KREIDER, who's been using his physicality a little bit more lately. I think it's going to be two fun games against the Bruins.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm looking forward to them. Again, I'm not feeling as optimistic. I hope I'm wrong. And who knows? Maybe we'll find out at some point this week more clarity on Panarin. And
Tuesday's game is at 6, by the way.
What's that?
Tuesday's game is at 6.
Yes, yeah. So it's an hour
I don't know
earlier.
Why. Is it like a special holiday or something that the game's that early?
Not off the top of my head. Maybe I'd say maybe there's something going on in Pittsburgh in PNC Arena, I believe, but I actually don't think so because they don't have basketball games there.
No, I don't know. Pittsburgh doesn't have an NBA team.
No, so yeah, I think we really touched on everything.
Because they probably have to fix that lottery too. If they had one.
What's that?
If they had an NBA team in Pittsburgh, they'd have to rig that lottery too.
Oh, you're not wrong. You really aren't. Yeah, we'll see how long they last with Crosby and Malkin, and if they
Yeah.
actually turn things around this year or not. We talked about that already. But before I let you go, before we get out of here, everybody, let's touch on just real quick. We're talking, within like a couple minutes. Do a quick summary on how the Rangers prospects have looked this week, in particular Vitaly Krasov.
Oh, Kravtsov had a good start to the KHL playoffs. Had a goal and 2 assists in his first 2 games. Third game, Tractor came out really flat. They lost 4-0. They're down 2-1. But if they win Game 4, then they go back on the road for Game 5. So I think tomorrow's game is going to be crucial for Tractor's playoff hopes. Niels Lundqvist hasn't played in a week. He's not injured or suspended. It's just that his team has not had a game in a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a weird week in the SHL. There were only a handful of games. I think because of all the COVID had a lot of games postponed, and they used this week to sort of catch up on the schedule. But he's back tomorrow. I mean, look, I'm enjoying every game I can with Niels Lundqvist before he goes over to New York. Pajuniemi's back in the lineup, back from injury, had 2 assists on Friday, I think. And Levi Aaltonen moved to a different team in the Finnish league.
Yep.
Signed a contract until the end of 2023. Hopefully he gets a little bit more playing time because the team he was on added Jeremy Bracco, and the depth just pushed him out of the lineup there.
Oh, so Bracco is in Europe. I didn't know what happened there with him.
No, yes. Jeremy Bracco is playing in Finland now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No. That's something that we'll have to talk about off air because the Bracco situation is interesting.
And then North American prospects quickly. Matthew Robertson played 4 games so far in the WHL. Braden Schneider starting this week.
And Braden Schneider has signed his ELC with the Rangers. I don't know if we touched on that. So just so everyone knows.
Yeah. Braden Schneider signed his entry-level contract. It kicks in on July 1st for next season.
Yep.
Not slide eligible, so we know it will expire in 2024 regardless of what happens. He's under contract now, so I expect him to start in Hartford next season. Hopefully a pairing with him and Robertson. That will be a lot of fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But the last prospect I want to touch on, and he really deserves a shout-out, is Hunter Skinner. 4th-round pick in 2019. Not a lot of Ranger fans knew anything about him. Flew under the radar, went to the London Knights at the OHL. And then this season, because the OHL is still postponed, he signed a contract with the Utah Grizzlies in the ECHL. And he has broken basically every record in the ECHL for teenage defensemen.
Wow.
I had to look it up. There's about 127 players who have played in the ECHL in the last 30 years as teenagers. So it's not as common for teenagers to play in the ECHL, but it has happened before. He has 8 goals and 7 assists in 20 games.
As a defenseman.
And all time in the ECHL, and this goes back all the way to the 1920s, all time in the ECHL among under 20 players, he ranks 7th in goals, 8th in points, first among defensemen in points, first among defensemen in goals, second among defensemen in points. So in the 90-year history of the ECHL, there has not been a teenage defenseman that puts up more goals in a season, and he's only played 20 games.
Oh, wow.
So he's been a revelation, and the Utah Grizzlies are happy with him. Not sure when he has to go back to the OHL, but every game with him is just fun to watch. He's always out there for the opening face-off. So they really trust this kid who's only 19 years old. His rights expire this summer, but I expect the Rangers to sign him because our depth on the right side of defense
is not nearly as deep on the left side.
No. Of course, we have our 3 starters in New York next season with Fox, Trouba, and Lundqvist. But behind those 3, there's basically only Braden Schneider, and then it's Brendan Crawley and Darren Radish. So they really need some right-handed defenseman under contract. I think they're going to give him a contract this summer, and it would be deserved. He's had a good 2 years since he was drafted. I just wanted to give him a shout out because I don't think a lot of Ranger fans even know about him. let alone talk about him. So
yeah, I know he's definitely been impressing more than what we initially expected. He was a scratch, was on Team USA's roster this past year in juniors, as we know. So he's a
not
guy.
he won gold. Yeah, he won gold at the World Juniors.
Yep. So he's a guy definitely to keep an eye on. Could go under the radar. It's easy to get all worked up because the Rangers do have a lot of kind of one way or another star-studded defensive prospects, and this pool's still deep. So keep an eye on Hunter Skinner on that right side.
And Hunter Skinner is a grade A hockey name. I mean, it's one of the best names in the last couple of years, and that I've seen come out of the draft.
Hunter Skinner, I like it. I do. Well, hopefully he continues to develop, and that his performance in the ECHL is telling of what we can maybe expect on the AHL level as soon as next season.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Steven, thank you again, everyone. Thank you all so much that chimed in to today's episode of Rangers Review. I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure to smash those buttons, as always, if you did. And Steven, is there anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Not really. I'm just looking forward to those Boston games more than the Penguins game, actually.
Yeah, I am too, because the Rangers have been playing heated against Boston. They had like one blowout game with them, not in their favor, and they had one in their favor. But prior to that, they were very tight, contested games, and I kind of expect that to be the case this upcoming week for the Rangers, as long as the goaltending, holds up for the most part. So thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate it. And Steven, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.